January the 24th, 2022. Guys, I want to talk about the dip in the jet stream, the Arctic vortex, and what's going to be happening over the next few days. And this is just Monday, but guys, by this weekend, folks along the eastern coast and some of those areas could have another 6 or 7 inches of snow, maybe more than that, again, on top of what we've been seeing. But right now, I want to talk about, again, grand solar minimum. If you're familiar with the channel, you know that I've been talking about it for a long time, and all of us that have been here for a while have kind of seen the journey of the science. And what's important about that is during the last grand solar minimum, there was no satellites. We didn't have the internet where we could communicate like this. There wasn't weather stations everywhere. So I want to ask all of my friends that are up in this area, we're going to look at some of the information there, to come in and tell me how normal these temperatures are. In other words, it's a new science because we now have the technology to study the effects. We got volcanoes going off. We got ash in the atmosphere that's reflecting sunlight back out. Those are always signs of an approaching a harsh series of winters. And back in 535, guys, the year 535, there was a year to where there was almost no sunshine or moonlight because there were so many volcanoes going off, and there was a lot of disease, crop failure around the planet. But anyway, so what I want to do is to all of you guys that are in these affected areas, anywhere in the nation, including if you look in the bottom, Hawaii and Alaska, come in and let me know how different this is, because this is how you collect data. In other words, like I said, they've got weather stations everywhere, but we have hundreds of thousands of subscribers everywhere, and that can put data into what we see. Then it's not just for me, because you guys can look at the comments too. And I think what we're seeing again, we know that we're going into grand solar minimum. All the scientists agree on that. A lot of them don't know if it's heating or cooling, but it's obvious. There's extremes on both ends, but it's into a cooler trend each cycle. And many of the last cycles were stronger than this one. We're going to see an increase in solar activity, but it's not expected to peak. That top of the cycle is going to be lower than the previous one, and that's what's called, you're going to have solar minimums in every 11.8 year cycle. But as those minimums and maximums start decreasing, you start to see these effects, and you can trace it back to the ice ages, the modern minimums, and all of those events. And it's important for us to keep up with this, because it's not really mainstream to go against the global narrative on what's happening to the planet. So we'll leave it at that. But we keep up with it here. And so what I want to do, we're looking here in this area, central Iowa, down into southern Iowa, over into the east central Wisconsin area, Green Bay. You can see freezing frost warnings along some of the Great Lakes. In this darker area, here, southern Minnesota, here in South Dakota, here in North Dakota, northwestern Minnesota, 35 degrees below zero. Now, I know you guys see some rough weather, and we don't have that, thank God, because it would probably kill all of the southerners in about a week. We'd probably just all die off having to deal with that. And it's, people get, you get used to it. You get climatized to weather. Even here in the winter, if you work outside a lot in the winter, you start getting used to it. But guys, I'd like to hear your comments in these areas and in the other areas that are affected anywhere. And you can see winter storm watches and advisories out. But if you think back about the end of last January, what was the extreme temperatures and the wind chills this cold? And so let's just go and take a look at some of this. Now, before I read this, just quickly, there's a storm brewing in Europe. over between Europe and Russia that the entire planet seems to be getting involved in. And if you're paying attention to the headlines, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I don't want to go into detail. But if certain countries, including ours, sends a large amount of troops, like maybe about to happen, it's going to weaken our defenses fighting the bear. And, the dragon would have a pretty easy move at that point. Anyway, just throwing that in. Pay attention to what's happening there. But this is National Weather Service out of Grand Forks, North Dakota. They're talking about West Polk, Norman, Clay, Kitson, Rose Lake of the Woods, all the way down to Sargent, Richland, Western, Walsh, including the cities of Crookston, East Grand Forks. And you can pause this and read it all the way in the area I was showing you on the map. But what they're saying is the wind chill advisory remains in effect till 9 p.m. Central this evening. Wind chill warning remains in effect from 9 p.m. this evening to noon Central tomorrow. So basically what's happening is getting colder at that point. It says for the wind chill warning, dangerously cold wind chills expected. Wind chills as low as 50 below zero. For the wind chill advisory, very cold wind chills expected. Wind chills as low as 40 below. And guys, when I was reading this earlier this afternoon, as I was trying to get the time to sit down and do this, some of the lows were only going to be minus 35. So that's how fast this is changing. It says where portions of central, north central, northwest, west central Minnesota, northeast and southeast North Dakota. It says these dangerously cold wind chills could cause frostbite on exposed skin in as little as 10 minutes. Avoid outside activities if possible. If outside, make sure you wear the right winter clothing. Guys, that's redundant to say that for you folks that live up there. My point in the video was, again, at 50 below now. How does this compare to this time last year? In other words, this gives us an idea and a scientific data point on what the winter cycles are doing as we are going into grand solar minimum. And that, along with the earthquake information that we can get from the ash fallout and things like that, we can see where we're going and how fast things are getting there. But guys, we're watching this. Let us know in the comments. It's a heads up. Be safe.